entrepreneur and investor, getting acquainted with tax laws and regulations could be quite daunting. Well, not anymore. Introducing the Kpmg Tax Mobile App, where you can access all tax-related news, laws, and insights in one place. Also, calculating personal income taxes has never been quicker. To get the app, simply search for Kpmg Nigeria Tax on Google Play Store or iOS Store and install. Once installed, quickly do a one-time sign-up on the application to access a constantly updated library of news, laws, and articles alongside easy-to-use tools. The Kpmg Tax Mobile app has a minimalist design, making it effortless to use and navigate. What's more, if you can't find what you need, asking a professional is as fast as it gets. Let's walk you through the application. The full menu is accessible from the left and helps you jump to any part of the application in seconds. Access fresh tax news by clicking on the news icon. The seamless scroll makes it simple to view all news at a glance. You have news you've already seen and want to go back to? Just search. Expand or share each news item to your friends with the dedicated buttons. Adjust your news preference easily from the settings icon and tailor your content. We have embedded tax legislation and popular cases in our tax laws section. Are you eager to know more about taxation in Nigeria? Kpmg Tax app has more than enough for you. Stay on the cutting edge of industry updates with insights features. The new app brings together alerts, newsletters, articles and publications from industry-leading Kpmg professionals. You don't have to worry about missing important regulatory dates and other notable events. The notable date feature brings them all into one place in a calendar or list, however you want to view them. For the average employee, entrepreneur or business person, Kpmg Tax app has another important feature, the PIT calculator. Plug and play, simple as it gets. Input the required numbers and calculate your taxes. Also, the app has jokes and valuable tips. Check in to learn something new and fun. Still feel there's more to know? We've got your back. Ask an expert and get quick, insightful responses from Kpmg professionals when in doubt. Learn more from various authorities through recommended links in the External Links tab. Read all about us to find out more about Kpmg's service offerings, our responsible tax principles, and disclaimer. It's now a breeze to connect with us online. Just click on the link icon on the homepage to get to us on social media. Kpmg Tax app, connecting with you on the go.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and we're pleased to have you on this April edition of Kpmg Tax Chat. And today we'll be examining a topical issue, something of national discourse, things around the Petroleum Industry Act. And today we'll be focusing on what companies should be doing now. There is a reason why now is at the end of this. What should companies be doing now? And to have us navigate through this is Uzochukwu Obienu. Uzochukwu Obienu is an associate director in the Energy and Natural Resources Unit of the Tax Division of Kpmg. He is primarily focused on providing workable tax management and advisory solutions to companies in the oil and gas industry. He's gathered over 14 years of experience of professional tax, regulatory advisory, compliance services to clients in various industries, notable the energies industry, amongst others. Currently, Uzo sits at the Project Management Office of the Petroleum Industry Act Working Group under the Presidential Committee on PIA Implementation. So you would agree with me this morning that you have the right man for the job. So the PIA what should companies be doing now? And so we'll be talking, across these and the things that we need to really know on this PIA. So Uzo, this PIA, what is it about? There are a lot of conceptions, misconceptions about it. Can you just quickly tell us, maybe in 1-2 minutes, what this PIA is really about? Uzo.
Okay. Good morning, listeners, and I'm happy to be here. The PIA is what I will call an economic renaissance act, one that is set to transform not just the oil and gas industry, but the Nigerian economy as a whole. It was passed in August 16 in 2021. The PIA, amongst many other things, intends to, create an efficient and an effective governing institutions with clear and separate responsibilities in the petroleum industry. It established a framework for the creation of the NNPC Limited, which will be a commercially oriented and profit-driven national oil company for Nigeria. The PIA is meant to promote transparency, good governance, accountability, and generally good administration of the petroleum resources we have in Nigeria. The idea is also that it will foster a business environment that is conducive for petroleum operations and investments. And it's also hoped that with the passage of the PIA, we can also encourage a lot more local players in the petroleum industry in general. Now, the PIA is divided into four. And the idea is not to discuss the entire PIA, but just to give you a sense. It's divided into four main chapters, and of course, the miscellaneous provisions that follow thereafter. The governance provisions is where the issues of the regulatory authority is dealt with. The PIA recommends a dual regulator system, which many have argued that may increase the cost of governance again, because you're going to have a CEO, you're going to have commissioners in those two agencies. But again, if you look at where we are as a country, you want to say that you may also lean to the side of the argument that says we need the dual regulator so that we can have increased focus on post-extraction activities. Because one of the regulators will be focused on the upstream, which is the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission, which I will call the commission in the course of this conversation. And then we have the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Authority, which I will call authority for the purpose of this conversation. So if you look at where we are, over the past 60 years, there's been a lot of focus on extraction, and exporting crude. But the idea here is that going forward, we will see the country play a more active role in post-extraction activities. Refinery, and then also the idea is that we'll also be able to harness our rich gas reserves. Gas means nothing until it is out of the ground. We're already talking energy transition, so that's the argument around having a dual regulator, one that will, ensure that as quickly as possible, we can begin to harness all that we have in the ground in form of gas. In fact, a separate fund being created also to encourage our gas business, the infrastructure that we need so that we can have a very, very viable gas business in Nigeria. A fund has been created for that purpose as well, just to support the fact and the thinking behind the dual regulator idea. The commission, which is in charge of the upstream, will, in a sense, provide primary regulatory oversight over the technical and commercial activities in the upstream. A lot more powers has been taken from the minister and devolved to the commission, so that we can see a lot more efficiency and speed to actions, speed to approvals, without having to go to the minister all the time. The minister, to a very large extent, maintains oversight, right? Across both the commission and the authority, and to the extent of certain levels of approvals, they will go through the minister. But the commission and the authority, what has happened with the PIA is that a lot more powers have been devolved downwards, just to ensure that the overall objective of having a conducive atmosphere, overall objective of efficiency, overall objective of an environment that encourages investment is created. Those of us that are a bit older, we know what a ministerial consent will typically take, you know, but under the PIA, the idea is that, in fact, so many consents, you know, when it comes to consent, it's when you make the application, and a specified number of days in the PIA has been stated that beyond this number of days, if you do not get any approval, if you do not get any response, it is deemed to be approved. All of this is just to say, how can we make things a lot more better within the industry? Because we realize that this industry plays a critical role. You may argue that it does not contribute as much when you look at GDP, but look at the foreign exchange, and then look at what some economists call derived GDP, and you will realize that a lot is derived from the economic activities within the oil and gas industry. And if there is a lull in the oil and gas industry, it's easy to see it across all the other sectors. And so that's why the PIA, it's really, really big on the governance provisions, and it's one of the areas where there's been significant changes in the way that things will be done going forward. Now, the second chapter talks more around that administration. Administration in terms of licenses and leases. One thing you will see across reading the PIA is that there is an increased use of the word petroleum rather than oil. That's also to help shift the mindset from oil to petroleum, because petroleum includes a lot more than oil. It includes gas, and then if you look at the byproducts and all that, then you can also begin to think of refining, petrochemicals and all that down the line. So in terms of licenses, the PIA still has 3 licenses for the upstream players, but instead of what you call the oil prospecting license, you will now have a petroleum prospecting license. It's granted for 3 years, it's renewable for another 3 years. You have the petroleum mining lease. You also have petroleum exploration licenses. The general idea here is that with these new licenses under the PIA does not want to encourage people hoarding acreages that they are doing nothing about. So what you will find is that the sizes are a lot smaller. They are smaller. They want you to work your assets. If you have an acreage, cover the field rather than focus on a particular area, and you continue to exploit that area, and you refuse to make investments across the other parts of the acreage. And the reason is simple. So many countries are already talking energy transition. There are target dates across the world on when countries will exit fossil fuel. We cannot, at this time, still be holding on to acreages. If you are not working it, you need to give it up for another person to try his hands on it and see whether we can quickly harness the resources that we have, even before the energy transition becomes full-blown. So it's very big on acreage management. You see drill or drop provisions. You see provisions that speak to the fact that if you drill up to a particular formation, that formation beyond your deepest formation could actually be granted to another person, and so on and so forth. But generally, there's a lot of provision that seem to be focused on acreage management. There are provisions also around gas flare management. In fact, you will be required in 12 months to submit a plan detailing how you intend to manage the gas that will be part of the associated gas that will come with your drilling activities, even as you look for crude oil. It also specifies domestic gas obligations. The authority working with the commission will ensure that we have domestic gas available for the industries that need them locally. There are also provisions covering the midstream liquid operations, which is one of them that we know and has received a lot of attention is issues around subsidy removal, pricing framework for transportation, distribution, and processing of petroleum in general. There are also provisions around administration of downstream gas operations, and a lot more. It also talks about funds, creation of certain funds, specific funds that will be set up with the sole purpose of meeting specific objectives. One of them is the Frontier Exploration Fund. Frontier Exploration Fund is 30% of NNPC Limited's profit oil and gas from production sharing, profit sharing, and risk service contracts. The idea here is that there are frontier basins and inland basins where we think we should quickly also ramp up whatever it could be found there and get them all out of the ground, and so that we can increase our reserves and also increase our export as a country. So the idea is that that amount to be set aside for that investment. There is the midstream and downstream gas infrastructure fund, which I mentioned earlier. 0.5% of wholesale price of petroleum products sold in Nigeria, natural gas produced and sold in Nigeria, will go into that fund. And the idea is that we want to have a fund that is dedicated to the infrastructure, and one that will also help to encourage investments in gas and midstream infrastructure. So that, there's a lot of discussion around Ukraine and Russia and gas and all that. Yes, and we're not immune to all of those conversations. While that wasn't already in the force at the time of drafting of the PIA, but it's clear that gas will play a critical role for us as a country, even as we begin to talk of clean energy. And we have it in abundance, and we just need to find a way to exploit it and make the best use of it. And so that was why that fund was created. Of course, there is also the decommissioning and abandonment fund, not necessarily new, because all over the world, everyone that exploits the environment for economic purposes is required to replenish that environment. But what has happened here is that in the PIA, you will have to fund. When I say fund, you need to set aside the money, cash, rather than just making an accounting provision to say, oh, we have provided for decommissioning and abandonment. Look, you have to make an actual appropriation, cash appropriation out of your operations, and you will set it aside in that account. Similarly, there's an environmental remediation fund. The environmental remediation fund is it's also a financial contribution. It's also a funded financial contribution. It will be based on the size of your operations or the level of the risk involved in your activities in the environment. When you talk about issues of oil spillage, the Environmental Remediation Fund is that fund that you set aside to manage such issues should they occur. And the idea is simple. I mean, you don't want to wait until there is a major mishap before you start looking for the money for that purpose. The oil and gas environment is one that is considered high risk for the most part. And investments it only makes sense that something is set aside such that in the unlikely event or likely event, depending on how you say, that there is an activity that causes major degradation, you can look into that fund and pull from there to ensure that your business operations continue to run. If you think about some of the major spillages in the past and the cost of managing the resultant effect of the spillage, you will agree that if you were to take that out of the regular operations of a company, it will be very difficult for such a company to survive. So the idea is set this up, and if you don't use it and you are done with your operations, you have capped all your wells and you're exiting, by all means it reverts to you. So it's specific, is dedicated, and the idea is to ensure that we do not have companies' operations stalled by the fact that there is an environmental issue that becomes so heavy and such that their operations cannot take. By the way, these funds will be managed by independent financial institutions. It's not going to be paid to the commission, but it also needs to leave the accounts of the operators. The commission will have oversight in the sense of how have you come up about the amount and all, but it is not payable to the commission because some people have said that if it's paid to the commission, it becomes difficult to get it back. Now, there are also lease conversion provisions under the admin provisions, essentially saying what you need to do if you are going to convert to let me call them the P regime. We used to call the other ones are, you have OML, oil prospecting, but right now we have petroleum prospecting, petroleum mining. If you are going to convert from an OPL or you're converting an OML, it's up to you. You can make that choice if you want to enjoy the physical provisions of the PIA. And so the PIA also states certain conditions like compliance with the provisions of the PIA, termination of all existing court and arbitration issues, and so on and so forth. Again, it talks about relinquishment of any portion of your acreage that you have not worked, and it could be up to 60%. So the general idea is, again, is that if you are not working the asset, please free it up for someone else to work it. But this is optional, completely optional. If you want to do that, you may also decide that, well, I will wait until my license expires and then I will, convert. But for the people that are currently operating marginal fields, it's not optional. The PIA wants to exit that time completely. So in 12 months, they will all have to comply. 12 months from August 16, they will all have to comply and convert to petroleum mining leases. Okay, the third chapter really talks about host community development. You agree with me that this is such an important issue that requires attention. And so it defines who a settler is, largely as it's someone that holds a petroleum mining lease or a petroleum prospecting license. And it gives them the responsibility to set up a host community development trust. Part of what the trust will do is to ensure that the issues around, the whole idea is to have a sustainable approach to community relationship and engagement. What you have across right now is various memorandum of understanding here and there. You also have contributions that you have to make through NDDC. That stays. It doesn't, the host community development trust does not take that away. But the idea is that let's have something a bit more uniform, something that will ensure that the communities are not left out. Okay, so we set up a host community development trust. The settler will do that, and I said the settler is the holder of the license, either prospecting or mining license. You will have a board of trustees that will be appointed by the settler also. You can take members from the community. You have a management committee. You have an advisory committee. Then you conduct a needs assessment to say what are the needs in this environment. For most people, some of the needs have already been articulated in the memorandum of understanding that they have. And so you see how to upskill that, interacting with your community to see how you can get that to, at the level where you can say that you have conducted a needs assessment. Then there is a contribution. A settler will have to contribute 3% of the preceding year's financial operating expenses, actual operating expenses, not budget, actual operating expenses from the upstream operations affecting the communities will go to the host community development trust fund that will be created. You will have a constitution that will detail out how you will operate and so on and so forth. But the idea is that the host community development trust means that the settler will contribute, but it also puts a lot of responsibility on the communities, because the communities will also be required to protect the installations and ensure that there is no disruption in the activities of the operators as a result of their own activities. In one of the engagements I was having with a company and their community, the community kept asking that, oh, what if something happens and it's not our fault? So will we now be held responsible? Will the fund be debited to the extent of the expenses? And we explained that no, the PIA is clear. PIA understands that there could be extenuating circumstances beyond the control of the community. But where you have restive activities that makes it difficult for an operator who is genuinely making his contribution to operate, then it's only fair that whatever loss occasioned by that restive Sorry, I had a bit of a network issue, but I am back now. So I was talking about the host community and the fact that there is responsibility also on the community to protect the installation. And so that's, in a sense, what the provisions speak to. The Commission will still maintain some level of oversight, but a lot of responsibility as far as the host community is concerned provisions are concerned is on the settler, on the holder of the license. Now, there are fiscal provisions which most people are a lot more conversant with. There's a dual tax regime that's been introduced, the hydrocarbon tax, or if you may, a resource tax. The hydrocarbon tax is focused on upstream activities. The way I like to describe it to people is if you remember, for those of us that are accountants in the room, if you think of your manufacturing account, you recall that issues around raw materials are dealt separately at the manufacturing level. So if you think of the hydrocarbon tax, you can think about it in that way. So the core upstream activities is what it's dealt with under the hydrocarbon tax. So you will not go into expenses that relate to the office, like general admin expenses and all that. No, they wouldn't come in there. So it's to say you have lifted X crude, this is the amount, and what are the activities, or you can also call it like a gross profit kind of account. What's the gross coming from the direct upstream activities? And when you take that, you will have a tax on that. That will be the hydrocarbon tax. You will have the opportunity to take up all the other forms of expenses under the company's income tax, which is the regular company income taxes that we compute. Okay. So this is speaking generally to what the PIA is about, just to give us a flavor, even as we go into the conversation of what we should be doing. Over to you, Thomas.
All right, thank you very much, Uzo, for that elaborate summary. I'm sure that our listeners out there would have experienced one or two things or understand one or two things concerning the PIA. But Uzo, I want to ask this question very quickly. There is a rumor out there, that it appears that this PIA, given the things that it entails, has been postponed, that its implementation has been postponed. Some even say it's not really in force, given some statement made by the federal government at some point in time. Please, is this true? Because I know you currently sit, at the PIA, at the PIA implementation team in Abuja. So is this true? Is this a misconception? Can you just quickly clear the air so that we know what to do next?
Okay, that's a very important question. And interestingly, I've been asked that question a number of times. I think it was last week, the Chief Executive Officer of the Commission was on the television, was interviewed on one of the television channels. And he also used that opportunity to clarify this issue. The PIA has not been suspended as at today. What was suspended was the implementation of the subsidy removal provisions of the PIA. When I was making the introduction, giving the overview of the PIA, I did say that there were provisions into full deregulation in the PIA. The government, in its wisdom, felt that the time was not right for the full implementation of those provisions relating to subsidy removal, and felt that at least it should be suspended for upward to 18 months. So that is what has happened. As I speak to you, right, the committees are working tirelessly, and I mean tirelessly, trying to come up with regulations, trying to come up with structures that will ensure the effective takeoff of the NNPC Limited, structures that will ensure the effective takeoff of the commission, of the authority. And in fact, about 6 regulations have been already exposed. In the process of drafting regulations, there's a process where you have a 21-day exposure for people to make their comments, to make their observations, and to, say what they think about those regulations. Not fewer than 6 of those regulations have been exposed as I speak to you. In fact, yesterday, the stakeholder engagement commenced for those regulations that have been exposed for more than 21 days, because the law requires that you will expose the regulations for about 21 days. And the consultation is happening right now as we speak. Between the 20th and the 22nd, there is a stakeholder engagement that is happening at Transcorp. And I'm sure that major bodies within the oil and gas industry would have been invited to the meetings, and they are discussing as we speak. So the PIA has not been suspended. The provisions of the PIA relating to subsidy removal have been suspended for 18 months. And that is where we are. It's important, and I hope we get the message. The PIA has not been suspended as of today.
Interesting stuff. So the PIA has not been suspended, and there are regulations and stakeholders engagements on this PIA. Wow, that's quite interesting. Since you are close to part of this implementation, is it possible for us to just let us know part of the regulations and what the stakeholders engagement is about? I mean, maybe perhaps it could guide our listeners on what to do and what they should be aware of.
Okay, I did say that a number of regulations, most of the regulations that have been exposed and that are currently being discussed at the stakeholder engagement is particularly upstream regulations. The downstream regulations are also being drafted. In fact, it's one of the PBS committees because I walk past where they are, and they are there from morning almost till night every day. So I am aware that regulations relating to those community development, it's been exposed, and it's part of what is being discussed. Petroleum royalty has been exposed, is part of what is being discussed. There's upstream rent. Yes, upstream rent regulation is also has been exposed, is being discussed. Domestic gas delivery obligation is being exposed and being discussed. Conversion regulations, and also licensing regulations have been exposed, and they are being discussed as we speak. I'm aware that these ones, about 6 of them, have been exposed for about 21 days, and they are currently being discussed starting from yesterday. The meeting will run to 22nd of tomorrow, 22nd of this month. So between the 20th and 22nd, these conversations are going to be happening. And the idea is that if you feel strongly, and again, it's important, talking about what companies need to be doing. You need to regularly visit the website of the Upstream Regulatory Commission and also the Nigerian Downstream Authority. You need to constantly visit those websites. I know that they were hosted on the websites. They are required to, publish in dailies, but if they publish in a national daily that is not one that you are used to, you may not see it. So your best bet is to visit that site. There is a part of the website that says regulations for PIA 2021, something like that. You click there, you will see the regulations. You see, once they are done, you upload it there, and then you have the opportunity to read it. You have the opportunity to send in your comments, you send in your views. Usually it's better if you do that through your association because it tends to carry more weight. And I know that associations do have focus on such regulations. They give forward. Once that is forwarded, after 21 days, that they can sit down, discuss some of those regulations. After the discussions, they will update as may be necessary. And after the update, They will then forward it to the Ministry of Justice. Ministry of Justice will look at it alongside other regulations that may be enforced just for consistency. And then an official gazette will be released. So the focusing at the moment is to say, what are the major regulations that need to be released to ensure effective takeoff of the PIA? And so that's what they are focusing on. More regulations will keep coming. Like we see, it will not end, but the major regulations are in focus and they're trying to push them out as quickly as possible. Okay. What do you think?
All right. Thank you very much. It seems to me that a lot is going on from the regulation to the stakeholder engagement. So the question really is, what should companies be doing so that they are not just, caught up, by surprise all of a sudden? What should they be doing in light of this regulation, in light of implementation of the PIA, in light of the PIA itself? What should they be doing really?
Okay. Really, that's the conversation that we want to have today. The PIA is how many months old? And about 7 to 8 months old, and it's been signed. And there are clear provisions in the PIA. There are provisions in the PIA that may require further explanation. A company, a serious company, should at this point already be asking critical questions of this PIA. What is in the PIA for me? How does the PIA affect my operations? What are the key provisions that I need to be aware in the PIA given my operations? How does it affect the subsectors where I play? Those kinds of questions are the first and broad level conversations that companies need to be having amongst themselves at the moment. A strategic question at the strategic level: how does this affect us? How does it affect our plans? We have 5-year plan, we have 10 years, we have 3 years. How does it affect it? We have commitments, we have loans, we have cash flow concerns. How does this affect it? What is in the PIA that I can take advantage of? What is in the PIA that will potentially be a problem for our business operation? So that strategic view is the first and most important step that companies need to take in terms of analyzing what they need to be doing today. Okay, I have short-term goals, I have long-term goals. Where does the PIA sit in all of this? Is there a potential threat to my business existence by virtue of the PIA? Okay, those large questions will need answers at the strategic level. Now, a serious company should be also asking itself that, what is the financial, how does this hit my bottom line at the end of the day? Can I model my activities around the provisions of the PIA and see what it will yield? There's been fundamental changes around the taxes. We used to have one, we have two. How does the fiscal regime encourage my investment decisions in certain terrains? Those kinds of questions will help a company to also begin to, find the T's and the I's, which I will also talk about in terms of the details of what they should be doing. The second level of questions will be around compliance. Okay, it's a new law. A law must be complied with by the people that play in that field. So the question is, are there compliance requirements? in the PIA for me, new compliance requirements that I am not aware of, or compliance requirements that have changed, that have been modified in a way? If there are, what are they? What are the things I need to comply with? How many are they in my industry? Do I have a full view of the compliance requirements as far as the PIA is concerned for my industry, for my subsector? What can I put in place to ensure that I comply? Do I need a process change? Do I need a people change? Do I need to add more people to certain teams to ensure that they are strengthened enough to comply? Okay, I've looked at it. It's enormous, the compliance requirement. I don't think I can comply today. Do I have a plan to ensure that as it becomes full-blown, that I can comply? Do I have a compliance roadmap that details timelines, that details requirements, that gives me a high-level view of all the compliance requirements and what I need to be doing? Do I have something like that? Okay, so it's in the thinking, it's in the discussion, it's in the analysis. Those are the kinds of things that I will expect companies to be doing now. What's my mechanism to ensure that I stay up to date with all that the government is also saying about the PIA? Because anybody that is, if people are still in the question of is it being implemented or is it not being implemented, it means that we may not be very current in terms of what government is doing around the implementation of the PIA. Like I was saying earlier, a stakeholder engagement is going on today. Are you even aware of it as an operator? Do you have a mechanism that ensures that you can see these regulations as they're being drafted and you can make your own inputs? Are you relying on another company to make that contribution? After all, it affects all of us. Some people have that, oh, okay, it affects all of us. Now, if I look at the compliance requirements again and I look at the deadlines, then you then ask yourself, how do I prioritize my resources around the specific deadlines for certain compliance? Some are closer than others. There are some that are 3 months. There are some that are 1 year. There are some that are 18 months. So how do I align resources to ensure that there is focus on the deadline as they approach? If I don't even know the deadline, how do I even align my resources to do that? As you begin to implement, like I've been privileged to be involved in some of the companies that already implemented and trying to prepare themselves ahead of those deadlines, you will realize that the activities that you necessarily require to meet those deadlines will be much, much more than you had envisaged. When they write one line, I give you an example, in the host community development trust provisions, they say needs assessment, conduct a needs assessment. You could be on that for 3 weeks because you're engaging with the community. Okay, so if we sit down and fold our hands, the deadline will come. We wouldn't have met the deadline. We will have, as you begin to make applications, as you begin to require things of the commission or the authority, you will find that there are so many other provisions that they will require that you would have complied with before you can be entitled to some other things. What's your plan around your gas flare? What are you doing? What have you documented a plan? There are funds that require a certain level of contribution, and the contributions are not specified, but you are supposed to come up with a justification or a business case around how you have determined the contribution that you think you should be making. it can be that it's on the day that you are required to make that contribution that you begin to think about those. Again, the host community, because I've been lately involved in one of them, and I can see how long that process can be. Because it's not fully dependent on you. There is a handshake between the operator and the community as far as that is concerned. If you keep it too late, you may find that you may not be able to, complete it within the time. It's 12 months for that one in particular. So it's in the thinking, it's in giving it focus, it's in realizing that it has come to stay. The PIA is not going away. We may have delays, but it's a regulation that it's a law that has been passed by the National Assembly. We may have an amendment at some point, but as at today, it's with us. And we just need to begin to take responsibility for the aspects of the PIA that concerns us. If we don't do it now, we will only have postponed the evil day, which is very close. And I say this because I am aware that there are meetings upon meetings, and a lot of hard work is going on at the Presidential Committee on PIA implementation, ensuring that everything that is necessary for the full implementation of the PIA is in place. As we move closer to June 30th, you will begin to hear a lot more around some of the things, because there are certain internal deadlines that we've set for ourselves around certain things, and you will begin to hear a lot more. But the PIA is come to stay. It beholds on every company that is operating within the oil and gas industry to think about it, to say, how can I maximize the opportunities? And if there are issues, how can I deal with them early, even as they affect my business operation? So that's a high level around thoughts on some of the things that needs to be happening. We can, go into details of each of them as we discuss and say, okay, what can I do in this area? What can I do in this area? What can I do in this area? But generally, on a high level, these are the kinds of thoughts that my expectation of companies at this time is that they will be thinking along these lines, and not just thinking, actively seeking to take action that will ensure that they are not caught by surprise. PIA has conversion provisions. Have you even modeled your current operations along with the fiscals of the PIA to ask yourself, should I be converting now? Should I be converting later? Should I wait and just wait it out, and at the time when I have when my license expires, then we can talk about it. Those conversations need to be happening. You cannot defer them. Beyond the conversations, you need to take active steps and ensure that you are working to meet compliance provisions. You are working to take advantage of provisions. You are working to mitigate possible threats to your business, possible threats to your operations. You are working to realign your strategies in such a way that you will still be where you want to be. You're working to see what is the final return, what is my profitability, how does it impact it? How do I ensure that there are steps to mitigate any negative impact and maximize every opportunity created to up my bottom line? That's, in a high level, the conversation that I think that operators need to be having, and companies that are in this sector need to be having at about now.
Thank you very much, Uzo. I mean, that's a lot. And I'm sure that after this conversation, companies will go back to the drawing board and make the PIA discussion, even the boardroom agenda. I know you were very big on compliance when you're mentioning what companies should be doing, because compliance is key. Like you mentioned, it's a law, it has come to stay until it is amended. It is what it is. So is it possible to just quickly help us run, for the sake of our viewers and listeners, run through some of those, compliance obligation and specifically the timeline? Because it seems to me like time is of essence here. So specifically some of these timelines for the very important ones, maybe the one that should have happened in 3 months after the implementation, or the one that should have happened 6 months after the enactment, or 12 months, just very quick ones so that our listeners and viewers can know that, yes, I need to really, be on top of my game in this aspect of the PIA. Uzo, over to you.
Okay, that's a very detailed conversation, but I will mention some of the clear timelines as far as compliance is concerned. So from the upstream business, for those in upstream business, of course, conversion or no conversion needs to happen within 18 months. Okay, voluntary conversion, such that you can enjoy the physical terms. It needs to happen within 18 months. Otherwise, you will have to wait and for the expiration of your license. Host Community Development Trust, it's 12 months from the date. When I say 12 months, it's 12 months from August 16. So everything that has to do with the Host Community Development Trust, which, like I explained earlier, is solely the responsibility of license holders, whether petroleum mining or prospective. It's one that they need to complete within 12 months. Marginal fields also have to comply, within the 18 months. They don't have a choice, actually. For marginal field players, you don't have a choice. You have to, be converted to the petroleum mining lease. The only soft landing is that even though you will have a petroleum mining lease, you will not be taxed at the rate prescribed for holders of a mining lease or hydrocarbon tax. You'll be taxed at the rate prescribed for petroleum prospecting lease holders. Okay, so you will be taxed on a lower rate. Fuel development plan, you need to always have that within 2 years of commercial discovery. The decommissioning and abandonment plan, you need to have that within 12 months. I explained this earlier. The law did not prescribe a rate, but will need to build your own plan. And then in the plan, you will also have a justification of what you think you should be setting aside as far as the fund is concerned. Similarly, you have the fund. For the fund itself, you need to, in 3 months, 3 months from commencement of production, you already need to be able to make that contribution as far as the fund is concerned. But in building your plan, and also in that plan, prescribe or describe your activities in such a way that gives the commission a sense of how you have arrived at your contribution. Now, there's also the compliance with domestic crude oil and gas supply obligations that will happen 1st of March every year. The authority working with the commission will determine what the gas obligation will be, and then it will hand it over to the commission to enforce that. Yearly royalties, you have to do that within 6 months after year end. Annual tax returns is still very similar to what we have. It's 2 months, and the final returns is 5 months from year end. Okay, royalty is still similar. The requirement to separate your upstream, midstream, and downstream operations, that wasn't specifically stated in the law in terms of the timeline, but we'll expect that communication will also come way of regulation, advising when that must happen. Okay. If you started negotiation for new lease terms prior to the PIA, you have to complete it within 12 months. You have to complete it within 12 months. If you don't complete it within 12 months, it is deemed non-employed. If you go to section 310, 311, you will see some clear provisions relating to that. You need to submit a gas flare elimination and monetization plan to the Commission within 12 months also. If you're already operating, you need to have that plan within 12 months. Okay. Installation of metering equipment on every facility that, from which natural gas may be flared or vented. Before you commence your production, there's a need for you to ensure that there is a metering equipment on every facility from which the natural gas may be flared. It's such a long list, okay? Which other one may be necessary to know now? So voluntary relinquishment of petroleum license, petroleum exploration, you need to do that 3 months, you need to notify 3 months before the surrender, and let them look at what you have done and be sure that, yes, they can accept it from you. From the downstream side, you need to obtain new licenses, new permits for your operations within 18 months. You're also required to submit an environmental management plan similar to what you have in the upstream. There's an abandonment plan also. It's still 1 year. Both of them are 1 year. Gas obligations, 1 year. So Thomas, is a very long list. It's one that will take a lot of time for us to discuss. But what is important is that companies should, try to find out what affects them, depending on where you play, whether midstream, whether downstream, upstream. You will find most of them under their main provisions. So we can always have a conversation where you think that you need to have something a lot more updated. But it's a long list, and I've only tried to mention some of the clear ones as I see them. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Uzo. And I agree with you that it's a long list. And then if you need more insight into it, you can reach out to Uzo personally or reach out to KPMG. Right now, we've been talking for close to an hour. I know people may want to stretch, or people may want to distract themselves with some other things. So we'll take up the KPMG Tax app video. And then when we return, we start with a poll, an opinion poll, just to gauge our understanding, just to have a feel of what we think about this PIA. But right now, we'll be having, the KPMG Tax app video. So let us roll from the back end.
Learn on the go and stay informed. Our goal is to keep the average user informed and up to date with relevant tax information. For the entrepreneur and investor, getting acquainted with tax laws and regulations could be quite daunting. Well, not anymore. Introducing the Kpmg Tax Mobile App, where you can access all tax-related news, laws, and insights in one place. Also, calculating personal income taxes has never been quicker. To get the app, simply search for KPMG Nigeria Tax on Google Play Store or iOS Store and install. Once installed, quickly do a one-time sign-up on the application to access a constantly updated library of news, laws, and articles alongside easy-to-use tools. The KPMG Tax Mobile app has a minimalist design, making it effortless to use and navigate. What's more, if you can't find what you need, asking a professional is as fast as it gets. Let's walk you through the application. The full menu is accessible from the left and helps you jump to any part of the application in seconds. Access fresh tax news by clicking on the news icon. The seamless scroll makes it simple to view all news at a glance. You have news you've already seen and want to go back to? Just search. Expand or share each news item to your friends with the dedicated buttons. Adjust your news preference easily from the settings icon and tailor your content. We have embedded tax legislation and popular cases in our tax laws section. Are you eager to know more about taxation in Nigeria? Kpmg Tax app has more than enough for you. Stay on the cutting edge of industry updates with insights features. The new app brings together alerts, newsletters, articles and publications from industry-leading Kpmg professionals. You don't have to worry about missing important regulatory dates and other notable events. The notable date feature brings them all into one place in a calendar or list, however you want to view them. For the average employee, entrepreneur or business person, Kpmg Tax app has another important feature, the PIT calculator. Plug and play, simple as it gets. Input the required numbers and calculate your taxes. Also, the app has jokes and valuable tips. Check in to learn something new and fun. Still feel there's more to know? We've got your back. Ask an expert and get quick, insightful responses from Kpmg professionals when in doubt. Learn more from various authorities through recommended links in the external links tab. Read all about us to find out more about Kpmg's service offerings, our responsible tax principles, and disclaimer. It's now a breeze to connect with us online. Just click on the link icon on the homepage to get to us on social media. Kpmg Tax app, connecting with you on the go.
Okay, thank you very much for the tax app video. Please, if you have not downloaded the tax app, you need to download it. It's a wonderful app, and just like the video said, you have all the tax laws embedded on the app. You have your PIT calculator. You can even have drop a chat with a professional on the app. Please visit the Google Play Store or the iOS Store to download the Kpmg Tax app. Okay, so right now we need to go into the polling session. You can point your cameras to the QR code on the screen. Okay, and then it takes you straight to the polls. The poll is being hosted on slido.com, so you can go directly into slido.com, open your web browser, and then type slido.com, and the event code is 397568. Event code 397568. Alternatively, please, you can drop the link to the poll in the chat box, okay? So that it's easy for people to just navigate it. So we just give a minute or two for people to, for our listeners, our participants to get on the code, get on the polling questions. There are 5 questions, and it's an opinion poll, completely anonymous, just to gauge your response, how you feel about the PIA or the petroleum industry in general. Go to slido.com, type in event code 397568. Okay. So can we go to that page from the back end? Event code 397568 on slido.com, or you can focus the lens of your camera on the screen and scan the QR code. It takes you, it lands you straight on the page. Okay. Okay, the first question goes, Nigeria has suffered significant crude oil theft and pipeline vandalism. Do you believe that the PIA provision of 3% of annual operating expenditure to be contributed to the Petroleum Host Community Trust Fund by the operators is sufficient to promote peace in the Niger Delta area? Do you think so? Okay. We have 10 persons responding so far. And it seems to me like majority feels that the PIA will not solve any problem when it comes to crude oil thefts and pipeline vandalism. Wow. Okay, let's see how it goes. Let's have more people participate. Let's see whether the answers will swing in favor of yes as we proceed. We have 23 persons so far, and the opinion poll remains the same. Okay, why this is ongoing? What do you think about this? This is quite interesting because we thought one of the things the PI wants to solve is to minimize these destructions through crude oil theft and vandalism, but people think otherwise. What are your own opinion about this?
Well, for theft, the story out there that it's a bit more organized beyond the regular community Joe, right? So I would say for theft, maybe not. Theft is something that we need to fight as a crime and try to resolve that. But all the restive activities coming from not having a sense of belonging, as far as the oil that is produced within those communities are concerned. I think the PIA will from the engagement that I have had with community, and I think they are positive about it. The contribution is significant, much more significant than a number of people would have put into their GMO use. So I think, and the fact that it also places some responsibility on the community. You will find a lot more communities that will maybe look at it and say, let's even see how this plays out over the next few years. And if they begin to see that there is more sustainable development that then accrues to their community, they may be encouraged to embrace it the more. And this is just for the community part of the conversation. Oil theft, for me, it's a crime. It's a crime that needs to be fought as a crime and dealt with as a crime. Contribution or no contribution has nothing to do with oil theft as far as I'm concerned. And so that's the way I would like to separate the answers. But for the community, I saw a positive response in one of the communities where I visited, and they felt that, well, we'll give it a chance and see how it goes.
Okay, thank you very much. So opinion polls remains the same. 82% think no, why 15% think, there'll be some sort of impact. Okay, let's go to the next poll. Let's gauge our people's response. Next poll, please. Do you agree with the position that Nigeria stop all exports and devote the entire production to the domestic market while earning forex on the export of petroleum products? What do we think? We should stop exporting our crude oil. We should devote it to the domestic market, while we should instead export the products, the refined products, after going through the refinery operation. So do you agree with this position essentially? Oh, this is interesting. Okay. The reactions are coming in very quickly. And about 18 persons have responded, 17 rather have responded so far. So we need more responses to this so that we can just talk about it. Do you agree with the position that Nigeria stop all export and devote the entire production, to the domestic market while earning forex through the export of petroleum products? So in essence, Nigeria should become an exporter of the product rather than an exporter, of the raw crude itself. Okay, so Uzo, what are your thoughts?
Okay, that would be nice to have, but let's even ask ourselves whether we have local refining capacity.
Exactly.
Up to the current production, which is at close to an all-time low. I mean, the last time we had such low numbers, maybe you can go back to 2016 when a lot of the oil installations were being vandalized at the time. That was when we had this kind of output. We don't have local refining capacity up to even this low production. But I mean, I think the whole idea is that we need to, the events of the last few months have clearly shown us that we cannot continue the way we are now, depending on just exporting the crude. Before, when we hear of high crude oil price, it was a good thing for the country. But now we're, depending on where you sit, whether you're a private player or you are in the government, definitely the government does not want it to go beyond a certain price because that affects our ability to pay for the refined products as well. So yes, we need to necessarily ramp up production, both production and also invest significantly in refining. It will be players begin to go into that business. What we need to be doing is how do we incentivize that business such that people can go in. The delay in the removal of subsidy didn't help that conversation. We're hoping that as things go on, we will be able to devote more. If you remember in my opening comments, I said that there's a push to move away from extraction to post-extraction. One of the post-extraction activities is refining. If we must get it right in this country, we need to get to the point where we refine, if not all, but a sizable quantity of what we use, okay, it's refined locally and more in the private hands, in my view, rather than with the government. Can we get to the point where we refine everything and just refined products? That would be fantastic. It's baby steps, but we need to be seen to be consistently taking the steps so that we can make this a reality.
Consistency is key, like you mentioned, and we really need to move away from the extractive mentality, to a refining mentality. Okay, thank you very much. And I think the polls also support your viewpoints. Okay, can we move to the next poll very quickly? The third poll. So the PIA specifies 2 regulators for the oil and gas industry. Okay, do you think the industry needs these dual regulators given the cost of governance in Nigeria? One of the things that people have mentioned in times past is that governance is a bit expensive in Nigeria, even when you compare it to your counterparts all over the world. Now it used to be one super regulator, but now we have 12 dual regulators. So do we think that this industry needs this kind of dual regulatory system before given the cost of governance in the country? Okay, so the opinion of people out there, 60% thinks no. I think the no is still leading the chart, but very closely, 44% think yes. Let's see how it plays in the next few minutes. It looks like it's a close contest. So what do we think? What do we think? Do you think the industry needs this given the cost of governance of the country? It's a really close contest. So who's on?
Yeah, and I understand the concerns of those that may say that we tend to know how to unload costs as soon as institutions are created. You have a board, you will have a management committee, sitting allowances, there'll be salaries and all that. So a number of positions will have to be filled, and all that. So understandable. But also you need to juxtapose that to what's the intent behind this. And by the way, Nigeria is not the only country with dual regulator. You need to ask yourself, where am I on this hydrocarbon journey? And what do I necessarily need to ensure that I maximize any benefits that should accrue to my country? And so the reason, like I mentioned earlier, is to say, okay, we need to get these things off the ground. We need to get the crude oil off the ground. We need to get the gas. We need to be prepared for the energy transition. We could not fully maximize coal. And then people have moved away from coal. We still have coal, like they say, in large deposits in the Enugu area and so many other areas in Nigeria. But you can't talk coal right now. It's outdated, so to speak. So before oil becomes outdated, to necessarily give it focus. And to the extent that you continue to have both midstream and downstream sitting in a DPR, the old DPR, you will find that they will always play second fiddle to crude oil administration. The focus will always be on the crude oil. So it's to that extent that we said, okay, why don't we begin to even build capacity in this area, in the administration? We will see a lot of training and all that, even from the regulator side, to ensure that they are well positioned to even administrate over the downstream sector, because it's never really been a core focus for us. And that, in my view, it's critical at this point in time. I am of the school of thought that we should have the two of them. We should have focus and a level of accountability for all that happens right there. So I will support the view that we should focus on it. Cost of governance, to be honest, is up to us to see whether we can cut that. I know generally there's a discussion around, a larger conversation around cost of governance. This can also feature there, but in terms of separating the responsibility, giving clear oversight to the specific industries, I will vote for our regulator at this time of our economic life.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, the basis for your response are well noted. And the opinion poll says 64% thinks that we should have to do a regulator while 36. But in light of, the conversation or the things you mentioned, I think I'm swayed towards thinking that having a dual regulator might just be best for us, but the jury is out there. Okay, let's go to the next poll. And thank you very much for those that have been, responding to the poll questions. Thank you. Do you agree that the PIA will change the current extractive mentality in favor of development of the midstream and downstream sector? All right, so that's for our audience. Do you agree that the PIA, because it's one of the objectives of the PIA to say, let's move from this extractive mindset and let's have more focus on the midstream and the downstream sector of the petroleum industry? So do you agree that the PIA has the capacity to change this extractive mentality in favor of development of the midstream and downstream sector? Okay, a number of us seem to agree. Okay. Some decide to remain neutral, say no idea. Okay, but a number of us seem to agree. And if I'm to pick from what Uzo said the last time, I can guess your answer that you also seem to agree that the PIA may have a way to change this extractive mentality mindset. But let me hear from you.
I have an interesting answer. The PIA will not change the mentality. The implementation of the PIA will. Okay. So, because we have some aspect of the PIA that has been suspended now, okay, for reasons of the economic hardship within the country. And I mean, the government thought it to be so, and they have decided to suspend the provisions relating to subsidy. If we're going to move away from an extractive mindset, one of the key requirements for investments. It's a free market. So we must, quickly get to that point of a free market. My personal view, this is my personal view on this question. It is not the PIA, it is the implementation of the PIA that will take us away from the extractive mentality to where we intend to be. So more around the implementation rather than the letters of the PIA.
More around the implementation rather than the letters of the PIA. I mean, that's quite apt. And thank you very much, Uzo, for this. And thank you for bringing this to life, and for our participants. I know the answers are still coming. 32% have participated so far. Why 75% think? I also think they would have meant the implementation of the PIA would change the current extractive mentality, because I mean, if it's just letters, nothing will really happen. Okay, thank you very much. I think that should be the last poll, if I'm not mistaken. I think that should be the last poll for the day. So we can, the last one, sorry, I think I missed out. The last one should be, oil is now being found in places that are not located in the Niger Delta area. Do you think that this state should benefit from the provisions of the Niger Delta Development Commission? I know this was in the news, a while ago, like 2-3 months ago. Okay, so what do we think from the audience? Oh, we have a whooping yes, 88% think that this state should benefit from the provisions of the Niger Delta Development Commission. Okay. Wow. Okay, Uzo, very quickly, because I just want to quickly wrap this up in the next 3 minutes. What do you think?
Okay, I think they should, but we need to go back to I don't know what the exact wordings of the act, the NDC Act says, whether it's specific to region or not, but I think they should, it will be natural if the wordings are not couched in such a way that it excludes anything outside of the Niger Delta region, which I don't think it does, because Imo State is already part of it. Anambra is also getting in, or has already been included. So I think if I'm not mistaken, the wordings are such that it can accommodate. And if it can, why not? I mean, if you're producing oil, the idea is that there is environmental degradation going on in your region, or in your area, or in your state. So by all means, they should also benefit. And the people that are producing from those fields within your state are making contributions to the fund. So why shouldn't you benefit from it? So that's my answer. But again, we need to check the exact wording of the law. But my sense is that it's not restricted. It's one that should accommodate every other place where there is an oil production. The idea then was that it's a Niger Delta that's the main place, or the only place where we could get crude oil at the time, but it's changing. So I think it should be able to accommodate that. If it does not, it should be something that should be looked into very quickly, because the operators within those states are making the contribution. So why shouldn't those states benefit accordingly?
Okay, thank you very much, Uzo. Thank you, our participants. And I think a lot of our participants also agree with your viewpoints, that the benefits should extend to these states that are originally not part of the Niger Delta community. So I think we've come to the end of the polls, and thank you for all the persons that participated in the poll. Your opinions, and your suggestions, are worthy of note. So Uzo, very quickly, I think the first question, we mentioned things around the host community. And during your conversation, you mentioned about engaging host community, how some communities, are thinking in the direction of, the PIA, having something documented with the settlers. So I want to ask, generally, what do you think companies should be doing with respect to this host community? Because it seems to me like it's going to be a very big issue. right? So what should we be doing? What should companies be doing generally on the host community?
Okay, I think to start with, companies should first realize that it's not optional. Companies do not have a choice as to whether to set up a host community development trust or not. It's mandatory, it's 12 months from the date of the passage of the PIA. Now, if you look at that, then you then ask yourself, what does it mean for a company to set up a host community development trust? What will it entail for that to be completed? Okay, so you will ask yourself that, in fact, from a practical point of view, I think one of the first things you need to even do is to let the communities where you operate know about this provision. Okay, there is a PIA, and you'll be surprised when you get to those communities that you will find that there are some are retired lawyers of many years sitting in the communities. They are not completely oblivious of what is happening in the country. They understand some of the things that are happening. But you need to engage with them to let them also understand that this is a transition from your former arrangement. Like I said earlier, most companies have general a GMOU across the communities where they operate. But you need to first tell them, let them know that, yes, this is a provision. This provision, on the face of it, it's a more favorable provision, depending on the kind of contributions that company is making in under the GMOU. But for a number of players, it's a more favorable position for the community. So we will be making this contribution. It's 3% of our operating expenses and upstream activities, right, in your community, right? We'll be making these expenses. It will go a long way. It will help you. It will do this. It will do that. We need to set up this. We need to set up that. You just have a general conversation. One of the companies that I work with and to engage our community, they were at the verge of signing a new GMOU. So it was a case of, should we sign this? And then a few months down the line, also set up a host community development trust. So we had those conversations, we engaged with the community and said, well, what we can do, because the host community development trust provisions require the settlers to conduct a needs assessment within their communities. Okay, we have spent some time to come up with this GMOU. Does this reflect the needs of your community? And the general consensus was yes, we looked at it and we were fine. So we will accept this as what? As the needs assessment step in the host community development trust compliance requirements. Okay, so that's a step one. We've agreed that these are our needs. We discussed with the company. We said, what kind of vehicle do you think that you would love to use for the setup of the host community? And we explored some options, and then we advised and we can say, okay, this is the kind of vehicle that we are going to use, subject to any direct prescription by the host community regulations. I have checked the regulations. There is no direct prescription in terms of the particular vehicle to use for the setup of the host community. And we arrived at that. And then the next step is say, how do we put up a constitution? The law requires that we have a constitution to guide the activities. It has defined rules. It has defined rules for the board of trustees, the management committee, the advisory board, the fund administrator. Rules were clearly defined in the law, right? But the law requires that a constitution be put together. So let's work together. We put up what? A constitution. All of these can happen independently, not minding. We don't need to wait for the final regulation for all of this to happen. if you look at the draft regulation, you will see the direction it has taken. It is not trying to make any specific recommendations in this regard. It's all within the clear purview of the said law. So we have the constitution being drafted. As the constitution is being drafted, we're having conversations to say who should be members of the BOT, because we require that for the incorporation. Who should be members of the MANCO, the management committee. Within this community, who are the people that we can select also to be part of this? All right. So all of that conversation can all be going on even before the finalization of the regulation. To be honest with you, most of what is required under the Coast Community Development Trust can all happen even as the regulation is being finalized. I see that they have dropped a link to the regulations that have been exposed and are now being discussed at the stakeholder meeting. You can take a look at them and then take a look at them vis-a-vis the provisions of the law. It's really around providing clarity, but it hasn't changed anything around what the law requires of the settlers. So all those activities, developing a timeline to how we track this thing to be sure that by August, the communities have, the settlers have fully set up the host community development trust and are in a position to begin to make the contribution. Like I said earlier, some of the people in these communities are very literate, very learned, and they are also watching to see what you are doing about this provision that in a sense affects them positively, to get a sense of how you think of them or how you value them in terms of the relationships that you have developed over time. For one of the cases I was referring to, they kept saying that, well, we trust that you know what needs to be done. You have been with us and all that. And so we're watching to see how you also set this up in a way and in a manner that it's quick and is able to make for immediate accrual of benefits to the community. So these are just some of those steps that players can, settlers, as the law put it, can begin to look at as they think of the host community development trust. You may also find that your GMO use may not fully align with how the PIA has prescribed for the spending of the funds that will be contributed into the host community development trust funds. You can also then begin to have those conversations and say, so what are the needs? To what extent do they align to what the host community development trust provisions have specified? They may want something that you cannot accommodate. You need to begin to have those conversations. I said in some instances, it could take up to 3 weeks for you to then finally agree on, okay, these are the needs of the community, agreed with the community, and which will form the basis of our relationship with this community. And the law also specifies that, okay, representative of women, representative of youth group and all that will all be part of it. And then you can have that conversation. Now, that engagement also gives you the opportunity to, really talk about the responsibility of the community as far as the PIA is concerned. And we spent a lot of time, talking about that responsibility, trying to get them to understand that it's your money, right? But if you want the money to come to you complete, then you have to play a part in ensuring protection of the oil installations, okay? Ensure that there's nothing from the community that will make for destruction of activities of the operators. and they asked questions, they deliberated upon it and all that. It's up to them to find out or devise a mechanism that will ensure that that happens. But that engagement will give you the opportunity to impress upon them the need and what they should necessarily be doing. I think those are some of the things that I would immediately recommend. These are some of the things we're doing with some of our clients as well. Over to you, Thomas.
Okay, thank you very much, Uzo. Thanks for that insightful recommendation on what companies should be doing with respect to the host community development trust. Let's move away, a bit from the host community development trust, and let's even talk about the company itself. For instance, for the fiscal provisions of the PIA, we know, from the readings of the law, that is a bit different from what companies are used to. Is this something that you can quickly let us know what companies should be thinking with respect to the fiscal provisions, of the PIA? I don't know if you can do this in maybe like 5-7 minutes.
Okay, for the fiscal provisions, I think is a lot easier in terms of what the companies need to be doing. First of all, for those that are thinking to convert or not to convert, you will have to take that decision based on empirical evidence. There's no saying that you necessarily need to run a simulation of your activity and ask yourself both for the quantitative and the qualitative part. Okay, so the PIA says that I will be entitled to a lot more favorable fiscal regime if I convert. But it also talks about the fact that I may have to relinquish every acreage that is yet to be worked in any way. The details of that, the summary of it is that if you have not invested money in any of the any part of your acreage, you may be required to relinquish up to 60%. But if you have worked it all, or you are working those fields, then you don't have anything to worry. So the next step is to say, let me look at the numbers. Can I run these numbers based on expected projections and see what it will give? Just to even give me an idea whether I'll be worse off doing this now, or I should defer until such and such a time when the license expires. I think every company should know that this is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, you will just be you'll be moving without any data supporting the decisions that you are taking. When you run the numbers, it will tell you one thing: is there that to convert or not to convert. It could also be that based on your future projections, it will tell you the timing when will be the right time to make that conversion. Okay, and so you can do all of that, simulate that, try to see what the total government take as you take that decision. So that's for those that have to take a decision. Those that do not have to take a decision in terms of converting or not conversion also have certain obligations that will require them to have an idea of what the obligations under the PIA portends for the company. If you have loans that are based on certain cash flow projections, and under the PIA recommends a significant number of at least a number of funded deductions from your operations. You then realize that you have to necessarily again model your operations to see what the financial obligations should be. The treasury functions of these organizations should be interested in knowing what the cash implication of those funds and the other amendments to the PIA, including the physical change for the company. So you can look at all of that. There are more than one reason why it's necessary to look again into those figures and try to interpret them correctly and then model them and see the outcome. Almost even the government agencies are modeling the PIA and saying, what does it mean for us? Depending on what area you are concerned about. Okay, and so I believe that a company will be doing that, taking a position based on the information that the models will yield. Over to you, Thomas.
Okay, thank you very much, Uzo. So if your company is yet to run the model, you might be running late, but it's never too late for you to begin to think in that direction, to know what the PIA means for your company from a strategic point of view. Okay, right now, there have been a lot of questions from our listeners, viewers, both on the Zoom platform, some on Facebook, and some other social media platform. So we'd like to take some of those questions now, Uzo, if you don't mind. Okay. All right. So we have a question from Adaku Ofuegbu that says that if the host community, is host community trust to be set up, whether or not the settlor is converting, or is it strictly for those that are converting? I don't know if you understand that.
Yeah, and it's a good question because we hear a lot of those questions. So most community provisions are amongst those provisions that you will have to comply with, whether you're converting or not. In fact, the way the law is worded is that it is the physical provisions that you have an option as to whether you can comply with or not. So the host community development trust provisions are clear provisions that every settlor will have to comply with, regardless of his decision to convert or not to convert. I don't know if that's clear enough.
Okay, thank you very much, Uzo. I guess that's clear, except we get another feedback from the person that asked the question. Another question is this: if an operator chooses not to convert, will the company be subject to all the non-fiscal provisions such as host communities, environmental remediation, abandonment, gas flaring, etc.? I guess this is your last question, would have kind of touched on it, but for emphasis sake, you can just mention it.
Yes. So the answer is yes. The conversion conversation is really around the physical. You will be asked to comply with the funded provisions for abandonment, for environmental remediation, and the host community development trust. But the good thing is that they are all allowable deductions, even at the level of the first tax for those. They are allowable deductions. So if that is any comfort, they are allowable deductions. And for the abandonment provisions and the commissioning provisions, they will only be used as necessary. The requirement is that the change is that you have to fund that account. It has to leave the account of the company into the bank, right? But if you are done with your activities, like I said earlier, and you have capped your wells, and there is some change from there, it goes back to you. At that point, it will be subjected to tax, and then it will go back to you. Same with environmental remediation. You operate in the country, or you're a businessman here, and you decide that I'm no longer interested, my license is up, I'm handing it back to the government. They will check whatever is in that funded reserve, if I may call it that. And if you have change, as it were, you will get back your money, of course, after tax, because it's an appropriation out of profit.
Thank you very much, Uzo. Another question, there's a lot of questions on this host community. Another question says, what happens in a situation where your assets are scattered across different zones? Is the company or the operator required to set up host community trust per location?
At the moment, yes. I'm aware that this has generated a lot of conversation and possibly might be part of what may be in discussion as we are speaking right now. But yes, the idea is that the community has a host community. Or you have one for the community where you operate, one in the community where you operate, just like you would have had GMOUs across the communities where you previously operate, where you are operating. So if you're in 10 communities at the moment today and they are scattered, you will have a GMOU in each of those communities. So the idea is, if you remember when I started talking about it, I said there's also the sense of streamlining all those different kinds of agreements and having something that makes for sustainable development in those communities. So you will have them in those communities. I know a lot of people are asking questions, how do I administer all those things? That's why you need to have a strong BOT that gives you some, the idea is that the settler is not operating it. Set up the BOT. The BOT will be the board. They will run it. Yeah, there will be some recourse to you, but just, very little. Let it be strong enough. Let it be start with the right people that can run it, and you can focus on your operations. So that's the idea, and underscores the reason why you should also take the appointment into those committees or boards very seriously. It is not what to use to make somebody happy. You need to say, what do I need to do to also free myself of any entanglement and being drawn into the conversation, and they will run it and run it efficiently. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Uzo. Another strong question on host community development trust. And this one says, how is the host community development trust under the PIA different from the current NDDC levy? Is this not a case of multiple taxation? Uzo, what do you think?
The NDDC levy, the NDDC Act was not repealed along with the PIA, right? It was not repealed along with the PIA. The PIA specifically states laws that were repealed as a result of the passage of the PIA, and the NDDC Act is not one of them. So to that extent, that contribution will have to continue alongside this. The fund, the contribution to the fund, 3% under the PIA. So that's the short answer to that question. Is it multiple? Well, arguable, depending on where you sit. If you sit in those communities, you will argue that you should even move to 10. If you're an operator or you're a businessman, you're looking at your profitability, you will argue that they should take out one of them. But at the end of the day, if we can have peaceful coexistence that ensures that you're not looking at your back when you're making investments in those communities and trying to build capacity and ramp up production, then in the long run, I think it can be a win-win. But the short answer is that both contributions will have to run and pursue.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes to the end of the program, but I have one question that I would like to also say. And the question reads, it says, one bit of controversy in the PIA is the relinquishment of acreages. So do you think that this is fair and equitable, given that the government had already assigned this field to specific companies and license holders? Okay, I'm not saying to speak for the government, but what are your views on it?
It's a tough conversation, but let me give you the perspective of the PI, and I've mentioned it in this conversation. Okay, so The idea is that I give you a field to work, to develop. So I assign an acreage to you. I want you to work it all. What's the government's interest in you developing that field? Your approval, when you develop the field, you calculate your reserve. It goes into the government calculation as part of the reserve of the nation, right? If it's a JV asset, they can already attribute part of it to themselves because it's part of the reserve. And we do reserve-based borrowing as a country. There's a lot of interest for the government that you develop the field. When you develop the field, there's work for oil servicing, there's work for mud engineers, there's work for drilling equipment, sellers, fluid sellers, and all of that. So, in fact, how we sometimes measure investment and activity is to say, what's the rig count? Are we drilling? What's happening in the field? So there's a lot that the government stands to gain when you develop. The company also stands to gain because if you then make the investment and then you have additional oil to lift, crude oil to lift, or gas, or whatever it is that you're interested in. So there's that interest. And the government is saying we cannot continue to wait while the world is talking about energy transition, and we're saying you can keep it and develop at your own pace. No, if you cannot develop, then you need to give room for another person to work it so that the benefits can immediately be derived. Because it's only so long before countries will begin to wean themselves of fossil fuel. In fact, the events of the current war, it's not unlikely that people will begin to also see how they can wean themselves of gas. Because that dependency, nobody wants to be at another person's mercy. So people are working very hard. Investments in renewable energy, so many things are happening in that space. So we don't want to be caught napping. We want to do what we can do and do it very quickly. That's the idea. But if you sit at the side of the company, say, well, you gave this to me, it was the basis of which I made payments, it was the basis of which I made calculations and all that. You're right also. But the point is that there needs to be some level of meeting of the mind. You cannot just focus on a small area of the acreage and expect that all of the rest will continue to be applicable to you. Why don't you begin to think of partnerships, farming and farmers, so that you can have enough financial muscle to begin to make those developments. So it's an argument that has to have a balance. We need to see what the government is trying to do. And on the side of the companies too, the government needs to also exercise some level of judgment in terms of how they judge what my development is and what I have not developed. But if you look at the PIA, to be honest, it's only focusing on what you have not done. If you have made any investment, they relinquish, you can keep that particular area. But that place that is fallow, the government wants to have someone else try to work it and get it to the ground.
Okay, thank you very much, Uzo. I think that is very clear to our listeners, our viewers. And we just have less than a minute. And I want to say a very big thank you to you, Uzo, for this opportunity to be on this April edition of the Kpmg Tax Chat. I'm sure that our viewers would have gained one or two things from this conversation. And our viewers out there, thank you so much for listening in, and thanks for the contribution and the questions. You really made this session a worthwhile session. So right now, I think we've come to the end of the session, and let's look forward to the May edition of the Kpmg Tax Chat. But I'm not going to leave you alone. I will leave you with our tax app video. That's the Kpmg Tax app video, which will come up as we exit the program. Thank you very much, Uzo. Thank you, our listeners, for all the persons who have participated. We say a very big thank you, and then have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
learn on the go, and stay informed. Our goal is to keep the average user informed and up to date with relevant tax information. For the entrepreneur and investor, getting acquainted with tax laws and regulations could be quite daunting. Well, not anymore. Introducing the Kpmg Tax Mobile App, where you can access all tax-related news, laws, and insights in one place. Also, calculating personal income taxes has never been quicker. To get the app, simply search for Kpmg Nigeria Tax on Google Play Store or iOS Store and install. Once installed, quickly do a one-time sign-up on the application to access a constantly updated library of news, laws, and articles alongside easy-to-use tools. The Kpmg Tax Mobile app has a minimalist design, making it effortless to use and navigate. What's more, if you can't find what you need, asking a professional is as fast as it gets. Let's walk you through the application. The full menu is accessible from the left and helps you jump to any part of the application in seconds. Access fresh tax news by clicking on the news icon. The seamless scroll makes it simple to view all news at a glance. You have news you've already seen and want to go back to? Just search. Expand or share each news item to your friends with the dedicated buttons. Adjust your news preference easily from the settings icon and tailor your content. We have embedded tax legislation and popular cases in our tax laws section. Are you eager to know more about taxation in Nigeria? Kpmg Tax app has more than enough for you. Stay on the cutting edge of industry updates with insights features. The new app brings together alerts, newsletters, articles and publications from industry-leading Kpmg professionals. You don't have to worry about missing important regulatory dates and other notable events. The notable date feature brings them all into one place in a calendar or list, however you want to view them. For the average employee, entrepreneur or business person, Kpmg Tax app has another important feature, the PIT calculator. Plug and play, simple as it gets. Input the required numbers and calculate your taxes. Also, the app has jokes and valuable tips. Check in to learn something new and fun. Still feel there's more to know? We've got your back. Ask an expert and get quick, insightful responses from Kpmg professionals when in doubt. Learn more from various authorities through recommended links in the external links tab. Read all about us to find out more about Kpmg's service offerings, our responsible tax principles, and disclaimer. It's now a breeze to connect with us online. Just click on the link icon on the homepage to get to us on social media. Kpmg Tax app, connecting with you on the go.